Welcome back to Not Another Mummy podcast with me, Alison Perry. Way back in the summer of 2017, I recorded the first episode of this podcast, and my guest was Sarah Turner, aka the Unmumsy Mum. And today she is back. Sarah rose to fame when a blog post that she'd written went viral. Called An Open Letter to the Mum in the Red Coat, it's raw honesty about how some days of early motherhood are just so incredibly hard, spoke to so many people. A book deal followed, and 3 non-fiction books later, Sarah has just published her first novel. Stepping Up is the story of what happens when tragedy hits a family, turns it upside down, and catapults protagonist Beth into a world of parenting her teenage niece and toddler nephew. It is a brilliant read. It's funny, it's uplifting, it's sad, and it's no surprise that it became an instant Sunday Times bestseller. So I caught up with Sarah a week after publication, and here is what she had to say. Sarah, welcome back to the podcast. You were my first ever guest. Yay! Back in 2017, 5 years ago. Not much has happened in that time, really, has it? The world's like pretty similar.
Yeah, same. I was going to say I was pregnant with Wilf then, wasn't I?
You were pregnant, yeah, and you came to London for some Mumsnet thing. I can't even remember why you were at Mumsnet, and I interviewed you in the Mumsnet offices.
You did.
Which is just like such a weird, not real life thing to do, like to interview you in the Mumsnet offices.
I know.
Like, what's that all about?
I remember it really clearly. I think I've got a picture somewhere of me with a Wilf bump on that day. So yeah, I know. God, 5 years. Madness.
Absolute madness. Yeah, and obviously you've gone from being a mum of 2 to a mum of 3. And the world is ending. So yeah, that's the catch up. That's where we are since the last time we chatted on the podcast. But how are you doing? How has your day been so far for you?
My day's been all right, thank you. I've done a triple drop off, double school drop off, nursery drop off, and Tuesdays is the day I work from home. So normally I go into a co-working office, but on a Tuesday I work from home because it's kind of a shorter school day, and then after school I have to do your nursery pickup and then take Jude to a tennis lesson. So yeah, it's kind of that calm sandwich sandwich filling in the middle of the day. My Tuesday at home, which is nice.
A calm sandwich filling. I like that. And Wilf, your youngest, he goes to school in September, doesn't he?
No.
How are you feeling about that?
I'm not letting him go. He's not going, Alison. I'm not letting him go.
Well, I was going to ask you, because like some mums are like crossing off the calendar sobbing as they're getting closer, and other mums, and I'm pointing at myself here.
Yeah.
I was like, just need to get to that milestone. I just need to get my child into school, and then everything will be okay.
I suppose it depends on which day you're asking me, but generally speaking, he's ready. Will's more than ready to go. He was 4 in December. You know, he talks for England. He's got a nice little group of pals at nursery. He's ready for it. I think it's just because I'm so aware that he's the last baby, and I'm kidding myself that he's still a baby. I mean, they'll always be my babies, but even at 4, he's quite, grown up now. And it is going to feel different, I think. And I know nothing, massively changes when they start school. I remember feeling like bereft when Henry started school, and then thinking, well, actually it's like 3 o'clock and it's already time to picking him up, and now it's half term, and like actually, but they do change. It is the end of an era, isn't it, when they go to school, because your time with them is no longer your own. You can't just go on a Wednesday, right, it's a nice day, we're going to go and do this. You're in the system, aren't you?
Yes. I remember also feeling the weird feeling I had was there's this whole big chunk of my child's day that I'm not aware of. And let's be honest, quite often when they're in reception, you try and get out of them, like, what have you done today? And they're just like, they don't really tell you. And they can't tell you. That was weird. I felt like so weird that all of this stuff was happening and all these influences were there affecting my child. And it's almost like that kind of like that lack of control, isn't it? Suddenly you're not completely in control of what's happening to your child.
No, exactly. And there's no way of knowing whether he's going to follow in the footsteps of his big brothers, but both Henry and Jude were the class crier in the morning. So drop-offs were really traumatic for ages. Not like you expect for the first day maybe, or the first week, or Henry was still crying after a term every day in reception, and it wears you down after a while, even though they'll be fine once you've left. There's nothing feels more unnatural than leaving a child who doesn't want you to leave them, does it? Like, it's an awful feeling. So I'm kind of bracing myself for that, even though Henry and Jude were always absolutely fine after I left. But one of my school mum friends now, whose son is in Jude's class, we met because she basically had to comfort me outside the classroom because I was sobbing, because I was just like, I can't keep doing this. He cries every day. And she was like, oh, love, come here. And that's how we met, and we're still friends now. So yeah, but I'm hopeful that Wilf might just boss it and stroll in. He knows lots of people at the school. It's familiar to him. He comes to do drop-offs with me. So it should
and
be
he's seen
fine.
his big brothers going every day.
Yeah.
He understands the whole concept of school. It must be so much easier.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But I'm excited for him. And I'm not one of those parents that's like, I wish time would stand still. Sometimes I have like glimmers of that, but mostly I'm always happy to kind of accept the next stage and challenge of watching them grow up. But yeah, there is something, Henry's 10. And that's a decade now that I've had a baby or a toddler or a preschooler at home.
Oh my goodness, that's a long time.
So they're all going to be at school, and it is going to be, and it's 1 year where they'll all be at primary school together. So we'll have reception year 3 and year 6, and then Henry will be off to big school, the following year. So yeah, I don't know, it'll be all right.
It will be fine, but I personally think that you are in what I think is the golden period of parenting, because you're out of the baby and toddler stage, which is, as we know, exhausting. And you've yet to hit the teenager stage. So the hormones haven't quite kicked in for your eldest. And apparently I hear that the teenage stage is a massive heap of fun. I've yet to experience it myself. So I feel like you're in that golden stage. So what are you doing to make sure that you enjoy every second of this before it all turns to shit again?
I always hashtag cherish every moment, Alison, as you know. I think for me, it's like some days are about survival and just getting to the end of the day and ticking off the jobs and kind of just like trudging through. But I think as long as you are having days or moments when you're kind of just taking stock, like I had a moment the other day. I mean, my 3 are mad keen on wrestling, and they were out in the garden the other day and they were wrestling, but it was actually, they were playing. It wasn't, nobody was physically injured, or there was nobody crying or arguing. And I sort of looked at the 3 of them rolling around in the garden, and I thought, this is nice. Like, this is kind of, it's all, it's all come good. There are moments when I just think, yeah, this is lovely. And then obviously there are other moments when I'm like, when will this end? The moaning and the whinging and the never being happy. And
it's when the balance tips, isn't it? It's when there are more of the when will this end moments. I found myself texting my husband yesterday morning. He was off getting ready in the shower and I was with the kids. And I actually texted him saying, I'm ready to sell the children and join the circus. Like, I'm done. And it's like, it's 8 a.m. and I'm done. And he came down and I actually started crying a little bit. Just that kind of like overwhelmed, kind of like, this is too hard. And he was like, take yourself off. I've got this. I'll finish getting them ready for school and preschool. Just take yourself off. But it was just like that kind of overwhelming feeling. And I was fine. Like 10 minutes later, totally fine, and I was like ready to carry on with the day, but it just comes out of nowhere, doesn't it?
I think humour helps massively. So if you can laugh at yourself, like the kids just take the mickey out of me all the time, you know, for, oh, mum. So, you know, the other day I was like, can we just have one day where everybody gets on and nobody's crying and we're not all obsessing over whose turn it is on the iPad? And I just had this thing. And then I could hear them in the other room doing impressions of me. I could hear them going, but Alison, the impressions were so good. Like I went from being really angry to just being like, I mean, I shouldn't reward such cheekiness, but it was so funny. I could hear them. So they didn't know I could hear them, and I could hear them going, can we please just have one day? And I was like, oh my God.
Sometimes it's when you hear yourself back like that, you're like sometimes, you know, one of my 3-year-olds, she's really obsessed with just like looking through all old photographs on my phone and videos, and she'll come across like a video that I didn't realize was being like, you know, she's been playing with it and she's videoing, and I'll hear my voice and I'll hear me saying something like, right, come on, shoes on, you know, and like, I'm like, oh my goodness, I sound so terse and I sound so like harsh, and I didn't realise that I sounded like that.
That's only because the first time that you said, right, it's time to get your shoes on, no one listened. So, you know, it captures you at the moment where you're like, shoes on, like the Hulk. Yes. You know, it's kind of but yeah, no, they are. So I find that we have, you know, there's just a lot of feelings in this house all the time, and, you know, from me and the kids, and it goes from kind of crying and everybody being upset and falling out over homework to us all just sat down having dinner and just, you know, pissing ourselves laughing, generally at my expense, but that's fine. I mean, I'm outnumbered, aren't I? The only female, and three boys and a husband. Even the cat's a boy, so yeah, it's kind of fine. It's a good balance, and I think you're right. I think I will look back on this time and these years and actually think it is kind of a golden era, really, and I've stopped doing that thing where you're always looking ahead to the next stage. Like I'm sort of quite happy where it is. I think when I was in the baby and toddler stage, that, you know, hands held up, I didn't cope particularly well. I didn't necessarily enjoy those early days, and was often thinking, you know, when we get to 1, or when we get to 18 months, or when they're potty trained, or, you know, it was always the next thing, isn't it? But now I'm like, no, it's all right, it's all good.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard. I do that all the time myself. Like, even yesterday I was chatting to a friend about the morning I'd had, and she was like, yeah, but, you know what, they're 3 now, which means, you know, they'll be 4 soon, and then they go to school, and it gets so much easier then. And so I'm definitely still at that stage of just like waiting for the next stage, like waiting for it to get easier. But I just think that's natural, isn't it? Of course it is, yeah. You know, we know that things get easier, and so it's understandable to be almost like setting your eyes on that, like, okay, it's all right, we're nearly there.
Yeah.
It's okay. Now, I heard you talking recently about how your husband was booked in to have the snip.
He's had it. Yeah.
It's happened, has it?
It has happened, yeah. I mean, it's not even a snip anymore, it's a laser, but we still call it the snip. His bollocks have indeed been lasered. Yeah. So that's it.
I mean, that's final, isn't it? What was that conversation like when, you know, when you were like, right, okay, we're definitely done, we're having no more children?
It honestly,
now you need to step up.
It wasn't like that here. It was. He had always maintained that was something he was quite keen not to do, until we had Wilf, and then at that point he was like, hotline to the doctors, and I think I said, you know, even though I did know, you know, three would probably be our lot, I was like, let's not be too hasty straight away. But obviously, you know, Wilf is now 4 and we don't want any more. So yeah, no, it was his. He took the lead on it and was like, I'm, you know, I can't risk it. Don't want any more children. So yeah, I felt quite sad. I did feel a little bit sad.
Did you?
Yeah. He walked off.
Were you a bit like, that's closing the door? That's, you know, that's a sort of finality to it.
Yeah, because obviously, you know, there's no. I knew that I didn't want another one, and also there's no way of knowing if I had wanted another one whether we would have been able to have had another one. You know, none of these things are guaranteed, but I think it was just quite final. I sort of saw him out the door. It was like a Saturday morning appointment, and he walked down to the surgery and he left. And I was like, oh, that's it, there they go. Henry, Jude and Wilf's little spermy brothers. No more for us. But yeah.
Was there a link between you guys adopting a cat and him getting the snip? Because it feels like that's quite a sort of common thing, I feel. It's like, right, we're done with the kids.
Yeah.
And we're coping okay with the kids that we have. So let's introduce a whole extra being into the household.
It was probably the cat thing. Maybe I felt like maternal for a pet. I don't know. But actually the kids had been badgering us about a pet for a long time. And for one reason or another, it wasn't right. Like when we were having like major building works going on and all that sort of stuff, we were like, well, not this year. And then there was something, and then then there was a plague. So we were like, not right now. So yeah, it was so weird with the cat as well, because I don't know, I'm not like a massive believer in kind of like fate and stuff. But the week before Christmas, I used to check the local animal shelter website, but I check it really kind of irregularly, like just, might be once every few months. And I hadn't checked it for ages, but something about Christmas week, literally the week in the lead up to Christmas, I was sat on the sofa and I went, I'm just going to see if they've got any animals at Little Valley Animal Shelter. And he was like newly added, like then, but obviously I couldn't have known that.
Yeah.
So it was like, it felt like it was meant to be, but I was a bit naughty because I said I filled out the form and everything. I didn't tell any of the family, and I thought it would like they might get back to me after Christmas. But I got a phone call being like, yeah, when can you come and meet him? And I was like, guys, just gonna have to clear this with Team Turner first. But yeah, he's great, little Frank, bless him.
Oh, that's lovely. Now, you guys, you've approached parenting quite a modern way, haven't you? In that your husband went part-time when Wilf... Was it when Wilf was born that your husband...
Yeah, so James we did share parental leave. So I did maternity leaves for Henry and Jude. Not that it's a competition. And
but if it was, you'd
but
win.
It is a little bit. And obviously by the time I had Wilf, I was self-employed. So, I didn't have the kind of safety net of maternity leave and pay and all the rest of it. And I was working on a book and everything. So we just decided to do shared parental leave, and I took 3 months off, I think, and then handed the baton over to James, and he had a year off from his job, and then he's now part-time, so he works 3 days a week, which was an absolute godsend during the pandemic, because he's a civil servant and is a key worker. He still had to go out to work on his work days. So when the country completely locked down, when you could only go out to Tesco or for exercise, and you felt you had to lunge doing your exercises going down the street in case the police stopped you, he was still going to work. So when I was doing all homeschooling and stuff, he would leave in the morning, and I was like, I'm supposed to be writing a book, James, but you do what you've got to do. And so I was so grateful then that he didn't work full time. So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Because part-time work is part-time pay, but it works for us at the moment, so that I can get some decent work days under my belt.
It's so hard to get the balance, isn't it? We do something a bit similar in that my husband left his job completely when the twins were born. Similar reasons at the time. I was self-employed. And I was like, well, there's no point in... It's like when you're self-employed, quite often as well, I felt like I was scared to, say, take a whole year off, because I felt like, I'm going to lose momentum and people will forget about me. And which is probably completely crazy and wouldn't have panned out that way. But it's just all those doubts as well with like pregnancy hormones and all that kind of stuff buzzing about. But so he's still off looking after the little ones, and I work full time. But the thing that I found quite interesting is that unlike in my mind, I think, right, so that all of these kind of like traditional families where the dad goes off to work and the mum's at home, I feel like the dad heads off to his 9 to 5 and just switches off from parenting. Whereas I feel like I'm working full time now, but I don't switch off. I'm still thinking, right, I need to, fill out that form for the school trip next week. Right, I need to, book in some play dates for the Easter holidays coming up. I'm still like juggling and thinking about parenting and then feeling guilty about what I'm not able to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm such a mug.
It's the parenting admin, isn't it? That's the thing. Yeah. That's the stuff that takes. But then I do wonder if that comes a little bit again from being self-employed. Like I feel like if I was going to work in an office or work for a bank or do one of the jobs that I've had before, I feel like I would turn up and I'd be thrown into it. And my phone would obviously always be on and the school would phone if somebody was sick or whatever. But I feel like that, I don't know, that kind of hybrid home work thing doesn't necessarily help that separation. Like if I had to go into another office and somebody else was my boss and I was reporting into them, I feel like I would be able to park the home admin.
Yeah, but you'd have to.
But the problem is, like, especially if I'm working from home, you see reminders of stuff. So I'll be like, right, I'm logging on. I'll do a Zoom meeting. I might have a chat with my editor. I might try and write a chapter of the new book. But then on the side, I'll see, oh God, we haven't paid for the second instalment of the residential, or we're supposed to have, checked the Spark spellings to see if there's new ones, and I end up doing those little bits during what should be my work day. So not always great at boundaries for that, I don't think.
Oh no, I mean, I don't think anyone's nailed it, honestly. And people think, you're approaching things in such a modern way, and it's not great, but it's not the perfect solution.
No, I don't think there is. It's just the best solution for you and your family at any one time, isn't it? It's just what works, what works the best, but it doesn't necessarily, it's definitely not perfect.
No. Now, Sarah, your new book, Stepping Up, it's a bit different to the previous 3, isn't it?
It is.
Tell us all about it.
Yes. So Stepping Up is my first novel. It's taken me about 3 years to get to the point that I've actually got it in front of me.
That must feel pretty amazing.
Yeah.
To have gone through all of that work and writing and self-doubt, as I know you went through.
I did, yeah.
To actually then have this actual book.
I know.
And I'm guessing it feels different to your previous books.
It feels so different. So there were times in the writing of this book where I genuinely thought, I can't do it. The like self-doubt was so crippling at one point that I did turn to my husband and say, I've reached the thing, like professionally in terms of my career, I've reached the thing that's going to defeat me. I just can't do it. I'm not cut out for it. And I think I'd had like first draft feedback that was constructive, but also a little bit kind of, I was shell-shocked by it because my editor, who is just the most brilliant, wisest woman ever, everything she said was right, but it's just really hard to read, thanks for your effort for the first draft. But when you start again for draft number 2, which was basically what I did. So of the 100,000 words of my first draft, only the first chapter remains.
How long had it taken you to write that first draft?
A year.
So a year's worth of work, and your editor is coming back and saying, that's great, and you need to start again.
Yeah, and do you know what? Now it makes total sense because I hadn't written a novel before, and actually that first draft was like a practice. It was like...
I've heard it described as draft 0.
Oh God!
So it's not even the first draft; it's draft 0. It's the clay that you've got to create to then shape your book out of.
Yeah,
and it would never be. It's not like you sit there and go, right, I've done my first draft. Let's get it published.
No, I know, and I think. It was I just thought maybe I'm not actually cut out for this. But when I reread what she'd written, actually all she'd said was, we know that the potential is here, and these are all the ways that it could be so much better.
Which is a kind of amazing, really. Like if you remove that self-doubt and that shock and that feeling of, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to do this. What was I thinking? Which I'm just putting those words in your mouth because that's what I would think.
Well, it wasn't working. I mean, it was a terrible first draft. Like, it really was quite bad. But, you know, I wouldn't have, like you say, with the clay, I wouldn't have had anything to mould, you know, unless I'd had that initial attempt. But yeah, it has been a huge roller coaster, and it's my first novel. It tells the story of Beth, who is in her early 30s and who is a bit of a mess, to be honest. Like, she's never really managed to stick at anything, like jobs, relationships, a bit of a quitter. That's what she's described as by her family. And then overnight her life changes and she becomes guardian for her teenage niece, Polly, and toddler nephew, Ted. And it's kind of her story of being thrown in at the deepest of deep ends, with a bit of a love story woven in, and also a friendship with her sister's 83-year-old next door neighbour, Albert, who becomes kind of an invaluable source of support to her. So yeah, it should be hopefully uplifting and funny as well as sad. But the first draft was relentlessly bleak. It was like, maybe that was because I wrote it during a pandemic, and but yeah, I'd promised this kind of uplifting novel and nobody felt uplifted. So I was like, start again, but do it a bit more, let's make it a bit less bleak, and hopefully it is. I don't know, the reviews have been really, really good so far, so I couldn't be happier with it. But also I think it's that thing of having been through that process. There did come a point where I was like, well, I am happy with it now. Like, I'm happy with it and I am proud of it, and therefore what happens next is kind of like, well, what will be, because I am, you know, I'm glad that I've got to this point when I really didn't think I would. Yeah. And, you know, like you say, there's a theme of grief running through it and loss. Yeah.
But you've managed to do it in that way where, you know, you read the book and it isn't kind of morbid, and there are laughs and there are funny moments and there are lighter moments, you know, within the story. But the grief and the loss, that's something that you've experienced in your own life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think when I was deciding on the characters for the book, you know, I think because the main character is kind of like adult female, people kind of always assume that, you know, Beth would be based loosely on me or be informed by me and my life in some way. And there's definitely bits of me in Beth, perhaps sort of inevitably, but actually it is Polly, Beth's teenage niece, whose experiences are probably the closest to my own, and that's because I lost my mum when I was a similar age to Polly in the book. So I felt like I had that backdrop of grief and the experience of what it's like to be a teenager who is, you know, mourning somebody like super close to you, because teenagers aren't like other human beings. They're quite unlike anyone else. So they can, you know, it's probably a sweeping statement, and not all teenagers are the same. Teenagers can be really quite self-centered, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think what that means sometimes is that when somebody who's close to you dies, you, like, the rug is pulled from underneath your feet and your whole world changes, but also you are still the center of your world. So I can remember when my mum died being like, having like waves of that absolutely like crushing grief where you can't move, you can't speak, you can't do anything. But then 24 hours later being quite concerned about what I was going to wear to the football club party the following Friday. Like, what, you know, would I have time to go and buy some hair mascara, and whose house were we getting ready at, and whose mum and dad could get us some Alco Pops. So it was kind of like, you know, it's a weird thing. So I had that, I felt like my experience of of loss as a teenager meant that I felt at least a little bit qualified to write a teenage character who was dealing with grief, because I was like, if ever I had that niggling doubt of would she behave like this or would she say this, I could kind of, cast my mind back 20 years and go, yeah, she probably would, to be fair. So
that must have been almost like a saving grace in a way, to have to. I hadn't ever thought about teenagers like that. And, I've heard quite a few parents of teenagers saying, that, we think of the teenage years as being when we, the teenagers get a bit more independence and they go off and they don't need their parents as much. And actually, that is the point where kids need their parents the most.
Yeah.
And that always surprises me. I'm like, I'm really glad I know that now. So when my eldest or when all my kids become teenagers, I won't just assume they don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess I was thinking that for you personally, losing your mum, age 15, I thought, wow, that must have been almost like the hardest time that you could have lost her.
Yeah, it's weird. I suppose there's never a good time. I was having this conversation with somebody who's, a similar age to me now, who lost her mum recently. And she was like, oh yeah, but I feel really bad complaining to you because, I've had like 35 years with my mum. And I said, oh my God, no, like it doesn't matter if you're kind of 15, 35, or 65, when you lose a parent. I think it's always going to be that kind of mad shock where everything sort of changes. But yeah, I feel like what happened with me as a teenager was that I didn't deal with the grief straight away. So I actually was fine, and people would be like, are you okay? And I would be like, yeah, I'm fine. And I was fine. It's just that the not being fine hadn't come out yet. So for the first kind of 6 months or more after my mum died, I was actually kind of all right. Like I would have moments, I would have like waves of not being able to cope. But then I would just be like, I threw myself into my exams. I was doing my GCSEs. And, friendships and stuff are so important as a teenager, aren't they? Like I was still really concerned about, well, why does so-and-so not want to sit with me in maths anymore? Or she's copied me by putting her hair in pigtails, or like all those kind of teenage dramas. I do think that what then happened is, if you haven't dealt with it, then it comes out at a later stage. And I think that is what happened. And it was actually after I met James that I lost the plot a little bit. And I think, I don't know, I'm sure a psychologist would probably have a field day and maybe say, I was kind of looking for a relationship because I felt like I needed another close relationship, and maybe there was an element of trying to fill that void a little bit. But obviously, a romantic relationship with James, as lovely as he was and is, isn't the same as having a mum, is it? So at that point, I thought I've got everything I want I've got everything that I've been looking for, but I still don't feel kind of complete. And that's when I started to, really struggle, and it kind of came out. So I think that's what happens. But I think it's to kind of not be surprised with teenagers if they seem like they're coping, because they might in that moment actually be fine. It's just not that. I used to get the head tilt, the sympathetic head tilt, and how are you all the time, and I'd be like, oh, bore off, I'm fine, like there's nothing, there's nothing wrong with me. And then at some stage there really was, but yeah, there was probably a little bit of that. I'm guessing that kind of almost independence as well. As a teenager, I remember feeling like, oh God, I'm fine, I'm okay. Like stop fussing over me. Yeah.
And
at school, especially as a teenage girl, at school, you just, your goals in life are kind of like be popular but blend in. So like be popular, stand out
but blend in.
Be noticed by the person that you fancy that you sit next to in science. That would be great. But also don't make a show of yourself. So the knowledge that they'd had an announcement in assembly, which I actually think was the right thing to do. So when I was off, I think I had about 3 days off school when my mum died. It was ridiculous. I think they'd had an assembly, and some, the head of year or whatever had said, just to let you know, Sarah's going to be back, and just I think they were trying to stop people from putting their foot in it. But of course, all it meant was that everybody just stared at me when I walked down the corridor.
The whole school knew.
The whole school. It was like one of those American high school things where everybody's like, they're walking down the hall and everybody's kind of, backpacks on, staring, whispering. And of course, we don't deal with grief and conversations around grief very well in this country. We definitely didn't 20 years ago. So people just wouldn't say anything. They didn't talk to me because it was easy. It was easier to...
I mean, we see that in adults, don't we? Like, so it's such a common reaction to grief that you think, I don't want to say the wrong thing and I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to pretend this isn't happening. Yeah. And then quite often the person who's grieving might feel like no one gives a shit. Like, this really... Yeah. Like, what's this all about? But as kids, even more so.
Yeah, it was like ripping off a plaster. Like, it was better for me to get that conversation out of the way. I had a couple of friends who were really good who basically said, what do you want to talk about it or not? Because if you do want to talk about it, we're happy to talk about it. But also, if you'd rather we don't mention it, we're happy not to mention it. And that acknowledgement was really important. But yeah, funny times. God, I wouldn't want to be a teenager again, I don't think, in a hurry. Like, in some ways I would, but it was a very, very strange time, but I definitely felt like it had, it gave me the confidence to write a teenage character who had lost someone, and sort of know that she would still be concerning herself with other non-death related things, because life goes on. That is the sad reality of it.
How do you think that your experiences with losing your mum, how has that affected your own experience as a mum? There must be some times, like obviously Mother's Day round about now, stuff like that must be such a weird time for you because you're being celebrated by your boys, but it must make you feel that loss more acutely.
Yeah, it does. I always kind of mentally prepare myself for, in the build up to Mother's Day, because I've had enough years now to know that you can't, you can't shut off the Mother's Day kind of advertising and stuff completely. Like, there are, brands that are really considerate and you can opt out of emails and all that sort of stuff, but by and large, unless you close your eyes and block your ears, there'll be adverts. And I think I'm generally then okay. There have been a couple of times where like brands or PR companies have got in touch with me earlier than I would have been expecting there to be a Mother's Day kind of message. And the email pitch has kind of been, hi Sarah, we were hoping we could treat you and your mum to X, Y, or Z, show her she's really special this Mother's Day. And, I just have to take a moment to be like, yeah, I would love to, but unfortunately, that's not ever going to happen. So it is, there are those kind of moments that take your breath away a bit, but I don't find Mother's Day that much harder than, any other day really, and obviously now because I have the boys, I sort of feel like it's changed it. The focus is it's all about me now, Alison. The focus is shifted to me,
as it should be.
But yeah, I don't know. For me, it's not special days necessarily that I find, like my mum's birthday or Mother's Day or even my birthday or even like last week with the book coming out, all of those things are moments where she is very obvious. I feel that she is very obviously missing. But for me, it's more like the hardest thing that I find is when I see women who are about my age, usually kind of in town, shopping with their mums or going for coffee or, it's like that real, like I'll see them kind of coming out John Lewis, arm in arm, bit of Christmas shopping or, just going out for a coffee and a chat. And I do sometimes think it's like a little bit of a window into a life that could have been. Because obviously, but I've now been, out of the all my years on the planet, my mum has now not been here for longer than she was. So, it's a long time, but I don't really have, an idea of what life would be like if she was here. So sometimes I see it and I think it could potentially have been like that. And you almost want to I don't know, I feel like I've definitely stared at people before and kind of looked wistfully and maybe smiled at them, and they've thought, who is this crazy person in Costa or whatever? But I'm just kind of, I don't feel angry and I don't feel any animosity to them or like jealousy. I just think it's really lovely, but it does make me think, that would have been nice.
Yeah. And, obviously there are a lot of people out there who have lost parents or family members, loved ones, and you talking about it on social media and including this theme in your book, I think will be massively helping a lot of people.
Yeah, I get lots of messages from people who read. So there was a chapter in my first book that was dedicated to my mum, and I get lots of messages from people when they lose their parents to say, I remembered that you'd written about this. But also I've learned over the years that as sad as it is to lose, somebody that you love, there are also a great many people out there who have really, really crap relationships with their parents, whose parents aren't there for them, who are kind of narcissistic and mean and, have never actually done any active or decent parenting. And actually, that's another sort of grief in its own, mourning the kind of relationship that you could have had. And I feel weirdly quite lucky that, I have that really nice relationship and that really kind of classic family dynamic to kind of mourn and miss, and such a happy, bright kind of childhood and upbringing that there's that, there's something to grieve, isn't there? Rather than that kind of bitterness as an adult of thinking, well, my mum doesn't care about me, or so I don't know. It's kind of it's opened my eyes over the years to their, it's not always loss that people are upset about. There will be people who will be seeing Mother's Day adverts, and it will be hard for other reasons, I think, as well.
Definitely, yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it, that you must find that so much in your job as well is that you can speak from your experience,
yeah,
but it's impossible for you to be fully aware 100% of the time of everyone else's possible experiences in every different situation.
Yeah, but sometimes, Alison, I do get messages from people, and you would think that from the message, that I should be expected to know all of that, but I should be expected to understand everybody else's situation and circumstance at all times.
At all times. The pandemic, I think, was quite hard for that, I think, because everybody was having such a different experience of it. I still, I'll be talking to some of my school mum friends, and they'll almost be a little bit nostalgic for the lockdown and homeschooling. Like, oh, wasn't it lovely that, all there was to do every day was just to go for a family walk in the woods and, all that time together. And I'm like, I literally wanted to scream every day. I wasn't keeping my shit together. Yeah. I never want to go back to that. Yeah. And everyone's experiences was so different.
Yeah, and exactly. And I can remember, you can't kind of caveat every post you do with, I know this isn't the same for everyone, and I know that I'm lucky for all of these reasons, but I feel like that should, people that know you, have followed you for a long time, should kind of understand where you are and where your humour lies. And I did a post during homeschooling that was it was basically just a picture of my completely frustrated and worn out face, kind of, and the caption was something along the lines of, I feel like I've unwillingly joined the Big Brother house, and I don't like any of my housemates, and nobody, there's wee on the toilet seat, and nobody will let me in the diary room to get out. And I was just at the end of my tether, right, this day. It was like a homeschooling type day, and then there were just then I just had loads of messages from people that were like, well, you're lucky that you're staying at home and homeschooling, because I work for the NHS or what have you, and when you feel bad because you're like, yeah, do you know what, you are right, so I do know that, but also that doesn't mean that I'm not having a tough time, because I actually am, I'm not coping very well, and I am under contract and being paid for a book that's not getting written, and if I don't write it I won't get paid and we won't be able to pay the mortgage, but don't let that worry you. And we're all, that competitive edge to who's having a shitter lockdown, I found quite grating at times, because at the end of the day, if emotionally you're not coping and you need to let it out, God, I feel like nobody should really take that away from you.
No. I was having this conversation yesterday with a friend. I said, I feel like we should normalise being allowed to talk about how hard parenting is without caveating it with, I love my kids' butts.
Yeah.
Because it feels like we all, and I do it myself, I love my kids, but oh my goodness, I literally wanted to run out the house screaming today and leave them all to it.
Yeah.
Why can't we just say that I wanted to run out of the house screaming? Let's just assume that the majority of us love our kids.
Yeah,
and
the
start
default
from that
position.
point.
Exactly. The default position is that we love them and, wouldn't change them for the world. It's just that there are days when we would a little bit change them for the world. That's the problem. But it's hard because also I always feel like messages that come from, I'm fine with messages that tell me why somebody has taken offence to what I've said or how I have said it, if they're sent in a kind of reasoned and reasonable way. So I will happily then reply and say, I am actually very sorry that I've made you feel this way, and I understand where you're coming from, blah, blah, blah. It's only if somebody's rude that I'm like, well, screw you then. Because sometimes you'll find that do you find this? That sometimes they will then actually reply and say, yeah, do you know what? I'm sorry. I was having a rubbish day and I took it out on you because I saw one of your posts out of context and it wound me up. And I'm like, yeah, fine. It's like a virtual hugging it out. So sometimes I like that. But if somebody's rude or kind of aggressive in any way, then I'm like, I'm not going to. I won't engage with that. You're on. There's your own.
Point because what they're saying is about it. It's about them and their reaction to something and their feelings. It's not actually about you.
No, and you can't let your whole day, week, month be ruined because Barbara from Wolverhampton thinks you're a terrible parent. Like, really,
Barbara.
Yeah, there's just you can't do it. You can't let it, get to you, because if you do that, you're in danger of not reading and not seeing all the messages where people have gone, you've really helped me today, or I really appreciate this, or this has been really useful. So it's that classic thing, isn't it? We head straight for the 1-star reviews, which is obviously exactly what my book's had 1-star review out of 202. And obviously I obsessed over it. I was in Marks and Spencer's and James went, oh, you've had your first 1-star review. And I'll remember.
Well, hang on. He pointed it out to you.
Yeah, we couldn't help it. We were obsessively refreshing Amazon that day for like chart positions and stuff. And I was like, what does it say? And it was like, what does it say? Something like poorly written, chick lit, disappointing, something. 1 star. And I was in Marks and Spencer's.
Was it a verified purchase?
It wasn't a verified purchase, but I did look at their other reviews. And they were all, I don't think anybody had ever managed to get more than 3 stars from this person. There were a lot of 1 and 2 stars. But I was there, I was literally stood with holding up a bra in one hand, being like, bloody hell, say what you think, why don't you? But isn't that funny that I've read, there are like 175-star reviews, and I couldn't quote any of them to you, but I can quote the 1-star, which is a terrible state of affairs. But it did actually make me laugh. It didn't give me that totally that when you get that sinking feeling. It didn't, because it was like so bad that it actually made me laugh. But yeah, I was like, oh, bloody hell.
Well, I would definitely say to anyone listening that not to let that 1-star, that 1-star review put you off stepping up.
It's at least a 2-star.
No. It's out now. Please go and buy it and give Sarah a 5-star review just to really drown out that 1-star review. That'd be really helpful. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. As I said, the book's out now, but tell us where we can find you online, just in case there's like 3 people listening who don't follow you already.
So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. I'm not young and trendy enough to have TikTok or anything like that, I'm afraid. So Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at the Unmumsy Mum. And yeah, my book is out now. It's in bookshops and Tesco and Asda and online. So
pick it up while you're doing your weekly shop. Just pick up your pound of mince and you're stepping up.
I know.
You'll be all good.
I'm loving the pictures that people are sending, where it's like their big shop trolley full of stuff, loads of baby stuff, and then this bright green book in the middle of it. I'm like, yes.
That's so good. Listen, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. It's been so fab to talk to you.
Thank you.